Eve geldi. Hi Martin.
Hi everyone.
I just want to say hello and thank you for now for your presentation. If you are ready,
I'm ready.
Yeah, okay. So
awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and hi everyone. I hope you had a fantastic time so far. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to talk to you about a topic that often gets forgotten. And I'm a web developer myself, and I am now working with the search relations team at Google here in Zurich. And my job is to help you, web developers like me, to actually be successful with Google Search, because Google Search gives you free traffic, basically. And you get lots of free traffic because you build something for people, and then people search for the thing you build. Like, I don't know, you build the best website for cat pictures on the internet, and then people will search for cute cat pictures, and you want them to see your site. And oftentimes that goes wrong, or it doesn't. Your website doesn't show up because we made a mistake building the websites when we developed it. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And I'm not sure why the screen sharing stopped. I'm sorry for that. That was my mistake, probably. The screens should be coming back. Can a moderator please put the... Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry for the little glitch. So today what I'd like to talk about is something that is maybe not necessarily on your radar. We will talk about debugging JavaScript SEO issues, because when we build web applications with JavaScript, that is fantastic. But we also, I mean, we test, right? I would like to hear it from the chat. Do you test your applications? How do you test them? Do you only use unit tests? Do you have end-to-end tests? Do you test things in the browser manually? And then also, who is testing for SEO issues? And do you know how to test for SEO issues? Let's have a look at how you would do that. How would you test for search engine related issues, for search engine optimization problems? Today we'll talk about three things, basically. The first section is, how does Google Search work with JavaScript, and how does my JavaScript that I write when I build web applications influence the performance of my website in search? Then what are the tools that you should definitely have a look at and use to figure out what's happening on your site in terms of Google Search and other search engines? And last but not least, we'll look into 2 or 3 cases of websites that experienced problems that weren't necessarily easy to catch. So we'll look at real-world cases. I built fake demo applications, but they are based on real-world cases that I saw people struggling with. Okay, so let's start with the big question that you might have heard if you were working with search engine optimization experts or SEOs. They might be like, oh, we can't use JavaScript because, you know, that's bad for search and that's bad for SEO. So can JavaScript and search actually work together? Can Google Search and JavaScript be friends? And I think the answer is yes. Modern search engines want to index the web as it is, which means if you build amazing, interesting things with JavaScript, we should be able to put them in the search engine so that people can find them through a search engine. That's our mission, our goal, right? So I can't speak for all search engines out there, but definitely Google Search does run your JavaScript. We do execute the JavaScript that you produce. You don't have to do server-side rendering. It's a good idea to do server-side rendering because normally it makes things faster and more robust. But you can just use React, Angular, Ember, Vue, Svelte, whatever framework is out there. You'll probably be fine using it. For the large 3, React, Angular, and Vue, I have checked those like 2018, 2019, and this year again. You basically are good to go out of the box unless you make mistakes. So what are like the things that people still believe in, or what are the things that you might hear when it comes to search engines and JavaScript that are not necessarily correct? And I picked like the top 3 things that I hear from SEOs when it comes to JavaScript, and that developers ask me because they heard something from SEOs. First thing is that a lot of SEOs still say, oh, you know, Googlebot doesn't really understand modern JavaScript. It uses like an old version of Google Chrome to render, or it doesn't understand client-side JavaScript. It doesn't understand React. It doesn't understand Angular. That's not really true. And since May 2019, Googlebot does not only understand JavaScript properly, but also uses an evergreen Chrome. So that means since May 2019, Googlebot keeps updating its version of Chrome. So you'll hear like, oh, Google is running a Chrome 41, so it doesn't do ES6 and more modern things. That's not true anymore. Since 2019, we are running the latest version of a stable Chrome, which right now is Chrome 83 or 84, I'm not sure. But basically, whenever there's a stable version of Chrome coming out, within a few weeks, we are updating Googlebot's renderer as well. So a modern Chrome runs your JavaScript inside Google Search so that we can see your content. You don't have to worry about Googlebot to be an old browser anymore. Then a few SEOs say like, yeah, but it takes ages until Googlebot actually renders the JavaScript. So it takes a long time until JavaScript content gets indexed. And that's not true either. We had a look. We measured the time that it takes between crawling, which means Google search requests something from your website, makes an HTTP request to your web server, and us putting it into a Chrome and rendering it. The median time between crawling and rendering is 5 seconds. The 90th percentile is a few minutes. So basically, it takes us a few minutes between fetching things from your server until we actually execute the JavaScript and then put it in the index. So it goes really, really fast, and it's no longer a problem. It used to be a problem until 2018, maybe early 2019. It could take a few days or even like a week or so, but we're down to a few seconds, up to a few minutes maybe. But Martin, how long does rendering take? Well, how long does it take to actually render your website? If you are opening it on a phone, for instance, and it takes a minute for everything to appear, then it will take us a minute to render as well. Then a few people still believe, oh, but generally speaking, JavaScript is bad for SEO. If you use JavaScript, your ranking will be bad and you will not show up in search results. That's not true either. These blanket statements, everything depends on the context, and these blanket statements are usually misleading. If you are doing something stupid with JavaScript, if you use it incorrectly, and we've all been there, we've all done mistakes. Undefined is not a function, right? So we've all seen what happens when things go wrong. So you want to be careful how you build your JavaScript, and you want to test your JavaScript, and you want to make sure that you don't have JavaScript that you don't need. You want to minify your code. You want to split your bundles reasonably. You want to tree shake anything that you don't need. You want to minimize the dependencies. You do best practices and you'll be fine. Search engines don't have an inherent problem with JavaScript anymore. Specifically, Google Search does not have a problem with JavaScript. All right. Now that we know that Search and JavaScript are not enemies, they are friends. We can use client-side JavaScript or JavaScript in general to build our web applications. How do you debug? How do you test things if you're not sure if you're doing it right? Well, fundamentally, you need a URL. And if you have a URL, you can test it with all sorts of tools. For instance, if you have a website out there, you can verify that website in a free tool called Google Search Console. If you go to g.co/search console, you can prove to us that you own the domain, for instance, by setting a specific DNS record, uploading an HTML file, putting a meta tag in your HTML, or using Google Analytics. And then you can basically say, like, I own this domain. And then we will start collecting information for the entire website in terms of search performance. So that means we know which pages from your website do we know exist. How often do they show up in search? How often do they get clicked? What are people searching for where your website shows up? Are there any problems? You get email notifications if we detect problems. And you can use that basically to monitor your site. But you can also use it to test it. So here I put in a URL. Here in this field, I clicked on test, basically about test, and then I get a result. This URL is known to Google. It's in Google Search. It is inside the index, and then you would see like if there's any problems. If you want a live test, you click the test live URL, and then we are basically crawling fresh and looking if there are any problems, and then walk you through the steps of fixing the problem. You can also click on View Crawled Page. That shows you the HTML that we saw when we crawled it and rendered it. So this is the rendered HTML. That's the HTML that we saw after rendering and that we use to index your website. Anything that isn't in this broad page HTML is invisible to Google search and will not show up. Another really nice testing tool that you can also use if you don't have the domain verified, if you basically have like a static local version, if you have a staging version locally, you can use tools such as Local Tunnel or ngrok to get a public URL for them. And then you can type them into these URL fields in the testing tools. There's a few different testing tools. This one is the rich results test. It's really cool. It allows you to pick, basically you type in your URL or you copy and paste code. You pick if you want the smartphone Googlebot or the desktop Googlebot to be used for the test, and then you click on test URL. Then it does a few things. It checks if you use structured data. Structured data, really interesting topic, but beyond the scope of this talk. And in this case, here is some structured data. There's like a logo on it, and there's a few other things on the page. Maybe you have like a product, maybe you have a recipe, maybe you have an article that would show up slightly differently in Google search. But also it shows you if we could load all the resources here, no loading issues. And if you would scroll down, you would get the JavaScript error messages as well, if there are any. And also, again, here, view rendered HTML shows you the HTML we saw after we rendered your page. So you know if we are seeing your content or if your JavaScript has a problem. Another really nice tool that I use is the mobile-friendly test, g.co/mobile-friendly. Same concept, you put in your URL that you want to test. You see if everything has been loaded. You see if there's any mobile usability issues. You can see a screenshot, which is really good to get a first rough idea of like, is the content even showing up? And you can use the rendered HTML to, sorry for that. I'm not sure where that noise is coming from, but I hope that it'll not be too loud. You can also use the rendered HTML again and see if there's any problems. You can also see the JavaScript console messages, including stack trace and everything, if you want to debug problems here. Right. So we looked at the testing tool. We found out JavaScript and search are not excluding each other. They're friends, not enemies. You don't have to worry about JavaScript too much if you do it right. And there's testing tools. There's the Google Search Console. There is that monitors your entire site. There is the rich results test. That you can use to get a feeling for how desktop Googlebot and mobile Googlebot see things. There's the mobile-friendly test, and all of these testing tools give you JavaScript errors. They give you the rendered HTML that we use for indexing later on. Great tooling there. All right, but now let's look at a few real-world cases of websites that I was shown as part of my job, and I had to find out why there are problems. So the first website that I brought to you today is a shop website. Actually, no, that's oh, okay. It should be a shop website, but we are in the different sample. Let me make sure that we are not seeing something from the cache. That was in the cache. There we go. So here we see like it has different products. It has different kinds of cheese. All of these are Swiss cheeses, but it also has French cheeses. There's Camembert, there's French platter, and then there's a mature French platter, and then there's like some world cheese, there's mozzarella, global cheese variety, and some young cheese from around the world. Great. And the person that ran this website asked me, why is only my homepage indexed? And the homepage is the Swiss cheeses. We only see Swiss cheeses in Google search. None of the French cheeses show up. None of the world cheeses show up. Why is that? And I said, that's a good question. Let's have a look. Let's take a look at what we can do here. So I'm using, let me actually change the profile real quick because I think it's really, really hard to see this right now. Here we go. So I'm using ngrok just because it's really, really convenient. I want to run it in the European Union. I don't want to go over the Atlantic for this. And I need port 5000. This gives me a public reachable temporary URL. This will change whenever I need to change this. So we go to this URL. Here we see Swiss cheeses, French cheeses. French cheeses weren't showing up in Google search. So let's use this URL to see why. What is Google search seeing when it goes to this URL? Page cannot be reached, but it works here. So there must be some sort of networking problem. There must be some sort of server-side problem that we need to look into. So I'll use the developer tools that I conveniently have available. Thanks to Chrome, we have the developer tools. I'll make them larger so that's a little easier to read. Let's go to the network. We disable the cache, and we reload this page. And what we see is it seems all fine. 200, 200, 200, 200. Yeah, that sounds good. But then you see here, it's not a 200 from the network. It's a 200 from the service worker. So there's some sort of service worker having pre-cached this. But Google search, because it doesn't install the service workers are only useful once you have been to the website at least once. But people who click on your website from search results are probably first-time visitors, so they don't have the service worker when they come to their website the first time. So that's why Googlebot doesn't install service workers. So what happens if I take this URL and open it in an incognito tab where I don't have a service worker installed? 404. That's a problem. This is an error. This is a problem where the server is misconfigured. To fix this, in my case, I just say, like, this is a single page app. Please serve this differently. And I should now be able to visit this website without a service worker. Let's try that out. Wow, okay, well, that was dumb because that was the main page. I wanted this URL here. I had it the wrong thing in my... Okay, let's try this out. Ta-da! Now it works. So now we can take this away. We can put this in mobile-friendly test. We can run this again. I noticed I unplugged my laptop accidentally. I'll replug my laptop while the test is running. And we're seeing some problems here. We would have to check what's the problem. It can't fetch the JavaScript. So then now we basically go into debugging mode properly and we figure out why it can't load this. Generally speaking, it would normally load this. For some reason, this actually failed today, but yeah. Content would show up, will be fine. If you server-side render, you don't even have to worry about this anymore. But that's a case where the server was misconfigured, and now we fixed that one. And you actually, that was the problem. That was the entire problem. Once they fixed their server setup, Google search indexed the rest of the URLs just fine. No problem there. Okay, that was the first case. The second case was a little bit different. The names are completely wrong, but that's... am I in the right folder? Yes. I think this is actually having its own server. Yeah, this comes with its own server. So this website works a little differently. This website loads a bunch of cats and shows you a list of cat pictures. That's great. That's a fantastic cat blog. I love it. It's amazing. You have all these cute cats, and I'm very, very happy about that. But they said the problem is some of the, so they had a slightly different website. They had a few pages and they had lots of text, and the text would show up, but the cat images weren't showing up in search. And I said, that's interesting. Why did the cat, why, what was the problem? Why didn't the cat pictures show up? And I did the same thing again. Actually, hold on. Now we need a new temporary URL. So let's get a new temporary URL. Why did I do that? I could have just not done that. Anyway, there we go. We get a new temporary URL. And we run this through the mobile-friendly test again. Let's see what we're seeing here. The CSS loads. Kitten Club seems to be loading, but then there's like, oops, something went wrong. Why is that? Why is there an oops, something went wrong? Let's have a look. You see, it says here, page loading issue. Oh, I can't actually zoom into that. Sorry for that. I tried to like zoom a little bit. Page loading issues. What does page loading issues say? If we go to view details, you see there's an API call here. that says Googlebot blocked by robots.txt. Huh. Because when we render, so if we look into the source code of this website, maybe we see what's happening here. Let's have a look. So there's a piece of script. There's some JavaScript. It makes a network request. Oh, that's not helpful. Okay, maybe this is nicer to navigate then. Can I please see the... Why am I not seeing the source code now? Oh, sad. In which case, I'll do it like this. I'll do view source. There we go. Better. And now I zoom in a little. I wanted to say a little bit, but actually we zoom in a lot. So there is a piece of code that makes a network request. And then once it gets the network request, it makes JSON from it and then deals with this. Unless something fails, then it shows, oops, something went wrong. So Googlebot has to make this network request, but it can't because Googlebot has to follow robots.txt. And if we look at the robots.txt, localhost 8080/robots.txt, someone tells every bot, including Googlebot, that they are not allowed to make requests to API/API. So when Googlebot tries to render, the JavaScript tries to make this network request to the API, but it's not allowed to, so it can't get the content. So what we can do here instead is, oops, actually we can do it from here probably. That might be faster. We can go into the robots.txt. That's in the public folder, isn't it? Public robots.txt, and basically delete everything, or we comment this out, something like that. I would just delete it, to be honest, and just let it not exist like that. Now we can load this again, and if we are trying to test again, with robots.txt, it's tricky because we cache them, so maybe we're seeing a robots blocking again, maybe we don't. No, here we go. The kittens show up. There's cat images. We can check the rendered HTML. Here, cats, 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 cats. Lots of cats. Great. Problem solved. Cats show up. There's still page loading issues with some of the images, but that's not a problem. That's just redirections. We don't care. More importantly, the images show up. We can see them. Don't worry about the rest. Sweet. So that was a robots.txt issue that we needed to fix. Great. Last but not least, we had another website that asked me. And I'll just go to localhost 5000 one more time, and I have to clear the service worker of that example. Let's remove the server. Hello. Let's remove the service worker, service workers, unregister, and we reload, and we see a news website. It has a bunch of news, and there's like plenty of news. The owner of this website came to the forum, webmaster forum, where you can ask these questions. And they're like, not all of my news articles are indexed. Only the first few articles are actually being indexed. And I said, that sounds like that's maybe a website with infinite scroll. And he said, yeah, it's a website with infinite scroll. And I said, okay, that's interesting, because I have a feeling I know what's happening. Let's have a look. So if I go to the mobile-friendly test again, this browser tab just die. Great. Let's try that again. Here we go. If I throw the URL into the mobile-friendly test, we see the articles show up. There's like a few articles showing up here. We can check the HTML. So the last article that shows up is this one, New 3D Depigmentation Technique. That is New 3D. This is this one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 articles show up, but none of the articles later on show up. None of the others are showing up here in the rendered HTML. That's where you want them to show up. So I was wondering, how do they do this? And now I basically reload the website. And I open the inspector. And I have a look. The list, the last element in the list, new 3D depigmentation. So it's what is in the initial HTML after the JavaScript runs. So let's have a look at what happens in the network. As I'm scrolling down, and when I hit the bottom of the page here, stuff's happening on the network. There's a bunch of pages being fetched here. This is coming from somewhere. It's unclear where it comes from, though. But conveniently, we can click on Initiator, and we see like there is a function in line 54. It's the function show page. Show page fetches additional information. Okay. When is show page being called? Again, we can use the initiator call stack for this. In this case, they are calling this function whenever the window is scrolled fully to the bottom. But Googlebot doesn't actually scroll. So scrolling doesn't really work here. I don't have time to show you the full solution, but basically, if you remember the cats that we saw, you would have to scroll to get the more cats. But it wasn't using a scroll event, it was using an intersection observer. Intersection observers work much better than scrolling events for lazy loading or infinite loading, because they are not relying on you to actually interact with the page in terms of scrolling. Googlebot does not scroll, but it can see infinite scroll if it's done right. We have documentation for that one as well. If you go to developers.google.com/search, you find lots of documentation for developers around search. All right, those were 3 case studies. Yeah, that's it. I'm through, and I hope that this was interesting and useful. We learned that search and SEO is fine. They are friends. They can be friends. Just build robust, good JavaScript. Use the testing tools. We have the mobile-friendly test, the rich results test, the Google Search Console to test your websites. And last but not least, test with everything you've got, with your developer tools, with Lighthouse, with the tools we just discussed, and to see where problems are coming from. If you have further questions, you can find me on Twitter. You can also go to, if you search for Google Webmaster Forum, that's a great place to ask questions too. So use the public channels to ask your questions if you have support questions for your website. And I think we have a few more minutes left if you have any questions right now. If you want to ask questions, now is a good time.
Hello, Martin.
Hi, Enes.
There is no question. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. See you soon.
See you. Have a great time. Enjoy.
Yeah.